Good morning, Luis. Isn't it fantastic to be here in this beautiful location? And we're doing work remotely, and it's an appropriate place just to ask what's happening in Peru and your forum. You've come out of the pandemic. Have there been any legislative changes by Parliament?
Yes, it's a pleasure to talk to you, Peter. Good morning. And of course, in Peru, we changed our legislation maybe 6 or 7 months ago because pandemic introduced new elements and new reasons to adapt our legislation because we had a previous law about teleworking, but the new law includes some flexibilities to deal with the new situation of the workers in the framework of the teleworking.
What sort of industries? Because it doesn't work remote working for every industry. Give me an example of the kind of work that it affects.
For instance, if you think about specific sectors, the service sector is the main consumer of teleworking, but it's possible to adapt this regime to mining, the administrative labors adapted to the mining sector, finance, industry, of course, but only in the administrative sector, because if you think about the common activities of mining, it's impossible to use the teleworking.
Yeah, and what about the rights of the workers, the employees who are working remotely from home? Are they disadvantaged, or is it business the same? How does it work?
No, they keep the same rights because the law forbids the change of the benefits for the worker if he applied to the regimen of the teleworking.
And what about...
It's a way to protect the rights in this case.
And what about health and safety? If you're working your home, you haven't got the employer or the boss there ensuring everything's safer. How does that work?
This is a very interesting problem because, when we need to check the workplace in the local of the industry, is very simple because the legislation probably has been designed to protect the worker in this space. But in the case of teleworkers, our law, for instance, applied on a specific or a simple situation. The employee have to give access to the employer to check the elements of the workspace in this case, and even as an alternative, the employer can make a self-assessment, identifying the risks and hazards that surrounded the workplace in this case.
And if that's the case, does it actually cost the employees or the workers more, or is the employer obliged to cover extra internet costs, air conditioning?
No, yes, all the costs are assumed as a rule, is assumed by the employer, but it's possible to make an agreement with the contrary stipulations.
And so how does the Peru situation compare to your other Latin American neighbors? Is it different, the same, close?
No, I think it's similar stipulations. For instance, the legislation of Colombia, Argentina, and Chile are literally the same.
And has it been controversial, or is it the way of the future, do you think?
In my opinion, the future is not necessarily all the discussions about the teleworking as a rule, but if you think about the strike, you think about the collective bargaining, hiring and firing, considering not the typical workspace, but in this case, the workspace in a house or even in another country, they have suddenly appear a lot of jurisdictional problems, even technical problems. So the future, in my opinion, is focused on these matters, not necessarily in the legislation of teleworking.
Well, very interesting, and obviously post-pandemic,
it changed the world.
Yeah, it's a change of employment law. Thanks very much for your time, Luis. I enjoyed talking to you and learning a little bit about Peruvian employment law.
It was a pleasure, Peter. Thanks for your conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.